Like to call to order the June 23rd Clive City Council meeting. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Council members Klein.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Judkins.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
And Michelinani.
Very good. I assume Shrikant will be joining us shortly virtually. Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is approval of the agenda. There is one adjustment under the consent items under AP. The rate there should be 35.05 rather than 34.97. That's 35.05.
Move
So
approval with the adjustment AP at 3507.
Second.
35.05.
3505.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the agenda say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. And our agenda is approved. Next item is our citizen presentation. This is the opportunity for any citizen to approach the council on any item that is not on the agenda. And I'll ask Pete to check if there's anyone online. And while he does, I'll just read our reminder of our commitment to character counts. We endeavor at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting our work, we expect all participants will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. So anyone online, Pete?
No, Your Honor, just staff at this point and Councilwoman Judkins.
Do we have anyone here in the chambers who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one approaching the podium, we'll move to our consent items, which includes amendment to AP for 35.05.
Move approval.
Second.
The resolution, and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? Consent items are approved by a vote of 4-0. Next, we have an introduction of a new firefighter EMT. And Clay?
Mayor and council, this is firefighter Alan Delker. Alan comes to us, sorry, better. He is being hired as an EMT. He's currently testing for his paramedic. He's going to start on the 27th. He's getting assigned to C shift. Comes from Norwalk and 3 years of experience at Mercy Hospital, EMT.
Very good. Welcome. Council?
Thank you.
You have people here with you?
I do. I have my dad, Eric, my mom, Laura, my wife, Riley, and my daughter, Peyton, and our soon-to-be here baby boy.
Why don't you all come up and get a picture with Clay, and maybe Pete will take one. And the mayor. Oh, and the mayor.
And the mayor.
I'm not used to that.
And we'll let Pete arrange this.
Right. So we got sort of tight groups, so we're gonna put you in the middle. And then everybody else kind of get on the sides. So we kind of turn your shoulders this way a little bit.
You two should be next.
That works great. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Pete.
And it looks like, Clay, maybe you're back up here again. Tell us about continuous process improvement.
be in that. Peter.
Yeah, I thought it was.
He's coming.
Yeah. Did you print it off? Yeah. This one? Got it right. All right, Mayor, Council, last year, myself and Ryan, Community Development, we implemented a pre-final inspection form. So I talked to some inspectors out in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and they implemented this. They were seeing a lot of re-inspections, a lot of time wasted, a lot of money spent on re-inspections from finals. General contractors across the board, they weren't ready. They were using us for a punch list. Over the past couple of years, myself and Ryan, we were kind of noticing some trends of this upticking. So I brought this idea of implementing this pre-final inspection form. And what the pre-final inspection form is the contractor goes online, fills it out, sign it. Essentially, they've agreed to look over a handful of the more common violations that we see. We implement it. Currently, we're using it today, and I think it's been a very good implementation. Good. Saves us a lot of time on the front end, saves us a lot of time on the back end. I think we've seen a reduction in final inspections. Contractors are more prepared for our inspections when we show up. And overall, I think it's been a great process that we've implemented.
I've got a few metrics.
Yeah.
On it. Clay, I think we started this back on, or we started talking about this back when we were at a school final, 2 days before school is going to start. And they had to do alarm testing and emergency lighting testing on the school. And we sat there for 2 hours for somebody to find the switch to turn on the battery back up for the emergency lighting. So we're like 2 hours of our time for somebody to find a switch, I think could have been used somewhere else. So we kind of came together and put this together as a couple here and just picked off some of the low hanging fruit that we had seen through the years. Some of the metrics that I researched here, since we started this back in November of 21, we have completed 28 commercial finals since then. Before November, we were looking at a 50% or greater fail rate on one of the items on the pre-inspection checklist. Since then, we've completed 28 commercial finals, and that number has significantly dropped to 10% of re-inspections with the pre-final checklist. With that, do you have any questions for myself or Ryan?
Great job. Council,
I'm a
Eric?
big believer in the process we use to improve. You guys done a great job, so I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. So the contractor fills out the form and then do you go back and validate all of their answers or how does that work?
So yeah, before they can, so they call it community development. Most of them are aware of it now. On the approval letters, we indicate where they need to go to fill this out before they schedule a final. But if they call and try to schedule a final and they don't have that filled out yet, they have to go to the website, fill it out, complete it. And then when they hit submit, it automatically emails Clay. Do you get a copy? Clay and then Kelly, who does all of our scheduling. So that way we have record or inventory that they signed at the bottom and hit submit. Yeah.
Okay. Well done.
Susan, anything?
No, just very welcome. Great ideas.
So I think we're in agreement. Two
Great.
thumbs up.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, the next item is a public hearing. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor, we did publish public notice on June 7th in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. As referenced in my memo, the bid letting for this project originally scheduled for last week has been moved to July 20th. That's based on some irregularities related to some publication timeframes that we experienced. So a couple items tonight, simply to close the public hearing, and then the second action item to reset the public hearing for July 28th. The letting will be on July 20th and we'll be back before you next month.
Very good. So what I'm looking
Move to
for,
close public hearing.
Second.
the motion to close public hearing in a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And then would clerk please post that vote? All right, so, well, I might have guessed that was 4 in favor, perhaps.
There it is.
Ah, okay. So that does pass. So we've closed public hearing. Now we're being asked to set the public hearing for
Move-
July
move to
28th.
Reset the public hearing for July 28th regarding Hickory Road, Berkshire Parkway intersection improvement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to reset that public hearing. Further discussion? Hearing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk then post that vote? So that new public hearing date passes by a vote of 4-0.
We have Councilmember McElhaney on now.
We have him, I'm working with him right now to see if he's able to vote. So
We might need to do a roll call vote for him.
Yeah, I'm not able to vote. July.
so we can,
Are you in favor of that public hearing date?
I am.
We'll add you as a yes for that. So that passes by a vote of 5-0 to set the public hearing for July 28th. All right, Amanda.
Mayor, council, good evening. So tonight we have before you the second consideration of the rezoning for Shadow Creek West from R1 single family to PUD, which in this case would also allow for a single family development, just with some differences from our underlying R1 district. So I have a couple things to follow up with you guys on from the last, or from the first consideration, I should say. Matthew, can I have the dot cam, please? The first item was, I don't remember which council member raised some questions about the stream buffer and meandering and some of those concerns that we've had more on the east side of the community with the areas that were built before we had floodplain and some of that other knowledge. But you can see here, I have highlighted those outlots as they're currently proposed in red with a hash on here. The dark blue line is the approximate center line of Little Walnut Creek. And then this blue buffer around it is a 50-foot buffer against the floodway. At this point, from the work that mostly Doug has been doing with the Walnut Creek Watershed Authority, we know that the best practice recommendation is for 50-foot buffer either on your stream bank or on your floodway. In this case, our floodway is larger than our stream bank in all locations, so that would be the larger buffer to use. And that right now is considered, again, to be the best practice for making sure you have enough buffer for those natural meanders. So you can see here, the only spot that it gets into any of the outlots is this little tiny corner right here crosses that red line. So I know some concerns were raised with that in the past. Just itty bitty right there, sorry. So there were some concerns raised with that at the last meeting. So I just wanted to bring that information forward so you guys could see that kind of mapped and how that is with the lay of the land. The second item I had to follow up with you all on was
Amanda,
the,
Ted has a question.
Yeah.
Question. I'm sorry, did you say that was 50 year or 100 year?
that is the 50-foot buffer on the floodway.
Floodway.
So that is not the special flood hazard area, which is the floodplain. All of the home lots are also outside of the floodplain. That line is shown on the packet. Well, I guess not in this packet, but that is shown on the plan sets we have currently under review for this, the preliminary plat, and the floodplain is all isolated onto the outlots as well.
So I know I'm sure others brought it up as well. I know I had some concerns about this last time, but I still see two lots there that don't have outlots. One where it looks like the water is right up on it, on the lot line, and the other, the kind of that second one down at the bottom, the pie-shaped lot there, that's still fairly close. And where the house may not be anywhere, maybe fine. We've experienced in the past residents who are very upset when the water even hits their lot itself, the back of their lot. And certainly I see two lots there where that's very feasible here in this scenario. Am I off base here or?
Well, I mean, in this case, this is the property line that they're working with as it exists today. So putting it into an outlot would be the way to manage that. Outside of that, I don't really know what options they would have because it is the existing property.
And I get that, but what we've seen in the past is residents get mad at us.
Right.
Because the water keeps getting onto their land,
Mhm.
right? And their lot. And they blame us for, at this point in the process, not having done our due diligence or whatever their perspective is,
Mhm.
right? And so I guess I don't want to see that happen with these lots in 5 years.
Well, example of that is our last meeting with Jeff Carter,
Right.
right?
I mean, Jeff
It's
Carter's
not
a
even
good
on his
example.
lot yet,
Right.
and he's been here a dozen times
Right.
trying to keep it from his lot.
And we've seen that. I mean, that's one example. There's
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
numerous examples of that, right? So I get, and that's why I get, so I'm still not, and it's just my ignorance, I'm not understanding the difference. Like if this is not the 50-year flood or the 100-year flood, when these waters come up,
Mhm.
how far into these lots are they going? And are we going to have to deal with this?
Sure. So the flood situation is one item. The natural stream meander is
Sure.
kind of a separate issue.
Okay.
So for the stream meander concern, this
That's
is
what this is.
currently, yep, that's what this is
Okay.
for those erosion concerns and how the creek will move and get into people's yards. This is currently the best practice. I mean, they can't change the property line of the property they're working with. That's why these get isolated into outlots, because they either have floodplain or could potentially be into that stream meander. So that is the mechanism we've used to protect those portions of the property. It has to be platted
To Ted's
because it's
point-
part of the property today. Sorry.
To Ted's point, though, you see the one with the very narrow outlet, right? I'm
Mhm.
assuming that's an outlet.
Sure.
He's asking if the 100-year flood hits,
Mhm.
is it go into that outlot and up into the yard?
In this case, the modeled 100-year floodplain will not encroach into the lot. It would encroach into the outlot of these. That is one of the purposes that the outlot serves.
Okay.
And I will let Ryan Hardesty answer that.
Good evening, Ryan Harsey, 4121 Northwest Urbandale Drive, Urbandale. I'm the project engineer with Civil Design Advantage. We are the civil engineer designing this project. So those lots in question, this is our more detailed grading plan. And essentially, this dashed dark line shown on the map, this is the extent of the 100-year floodplain. So for example, this lot 34 that has that narrow outlet,
Yeah.
there's 7 feet of grade elevation vertically from that lot down to that 100-year floodplain on the northeast side of the lot. And then it's almost 4 feet on the south end of that lot. So essentially when we set up outlots, it's set up so that the 100-year floodplain does not encroach in anyone's yard on anyone's lot. So the reason why those two particular lots have that narrow outlot is because there is such a great change in vertical elevation from that creek bank up through there that it's 25 feet up from that creek bank to where that the developable non-outlot is. So because of that difference in elevation, we don't need a lot of different depth there. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
realize
it's-
that elevation.
Yeah, it's a significant elevation change. So essentially, where these houses are going to be set at, I mean, those first floor, finished floors were like garages at, those can be 30 feet above Walnut Creek. I mean, if
Which
any
is
of these flooded, the entire rest of Clive would completely be underwater. I mean,
So that's good. And it's important that the house is protected, but we've seen it where even if the lot gets that water, we hear a lot about it, right?
sure.
So,
And that's why we don't have any lots that have 100-year floodplain on the lot itself. It's contained within that outlot.
fair enough. Thank you.
Other question, Michael?
Where would with this map up, so where would that bike trail you talked about, where would that be going behind these houses?
Well, preliminarily.
On the top of that ridge or?
No, it's at the bottom. So
Oh.
if you see this dash line that wraps around here, this would be, and it's preliminary. That trail is something that's going to be installed in the future after the city sewer project goes through there. But that's not going to be on that steep gradient. It's going to be down lower where that sewer line's going, because you couldn't build a trail on the side of a mountain. I mean, it's too steep where it's got that big vertical drop.
And the city will dictate the alignment of that trail segment through the city's property that we have now along the creek there behind these homes. That is City of Clive land.
Okay, Susan or Shrikant, do you have questions?
No, I don't. I appreciate the others that have been asked, though.
Thanks, Susan. Shrikant?
I did have a quick question just about the trail and some of what we discussed the other day with the park area up to the north.
Srikant, if I can interrupt real quick, that's actually the next thing I was going to talk about.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I jumped the gun.
Nope, you're fine.
Proceed, Amanda.
Okay, great.
One thing, just a point of order, Your Honor, just as we get deeper into the discussion, probably from a procedural standpoint, since you all tabled that second consideration at the last meeting, just as now that we're into discussion, it'd probably be good for the council to have that motion to bring it back off the table. Just from it's not a big deal, but probably a good as we get further into this.
So we have a motion and a second to bring it off the consideration off the table. Further discussion. If not, would the council please vote, and would Srikant give us his oral vote?
So my voting is now working, so I just entered it in digitally.
Oh,
Got it.
all right. We're all good. So if you get, Susan, are you there?
Susan,
Are
you a
you-
yes?
Are you in favor of
No,
bringing this off the table?
I voted against that.
Okay, so we're taking it off the table by a vote of 4-1. All right, further discussion. Amanda, now
Okay.
you can continue.
Matthew, can I have the doc cam back again, please? So the next item to follow up with you all on was the Parkland dedication. I know there were some questions at the last meeting. So I brought this exhibit to kind of help show where that parkland had previously been dedicated. The development agreements for Shadow Creek South and Shadow Creek North were explicit that the developer would get their excess credit to the benefit of their future development property, primarily referencing this lot that's currently under question. So that here, you can see the lot layout over there is kind of drawn in over the aerial here. So the Shadow Creek South area includes the courtyards at Shadow Creek and Shadow Creek Plat 4. And then Shadow Creek North area includes everything you see up here. So this shows the kind of solid darker green is what has been dedicated from this developer through their previous plats. That total land area is actually equal to 18.85 acres of dedicated land, but they received 13.72 credited acres because some of that area had stormwater management facilities with it, and any of that area is given a half credit for the area. That's been the policy direction from council. So that is how the totals were determined here.
Amanda, while we're on that,
Mhm.
just might have to do with this or not, but you said half credit on stormwater detention. It's a fairly new process that we're taking over some of those stormwater detentions. Has that been considered in that half credit, or was that prior to we started taking
Yes.
these over?
That was the direction for when we started taking them over, that they are providing open space. The ones the city accepts have been determined to give some sort of public benefit, is an outdoor feature, but not really to the same level that Parkland would. So that's where we've come up with that half credit. I know that at least predates me working on development projects. So I'm not sure exactly what year that came into effect, but I know down here with like Shadow Creek 3 and 4 and courtyards, that policy was in effect at that time. You can see then the darker hashed area is what this developer has done purchase agreements with the city for through the REAP grants. So that is an additional just over 44 acres of land that we've received from them through purchase at a reduced recreational value per acre on those appraisals through the REAP grant process. And then additionally, I included the other REAP acquisitions and other parkland area, not from this developer on the map as well in the lighter green. So you could kind of see that whole picture there. So they do have that excess credit, which can be explicitly from their previous zoning change and development agreements applied to this property. And then we do still, at this time, have both of those trail connections shown in their plan set. I believe that they would like to speak to one of the trail connections, though. If you guys want to, I'll hand that over to you to talk about.
Absolutely. So essentially, the trail connection that was discussed at the last meeting was this one on the north. And basically, this area here is this large detention basin that was constructed with the previous plat. So that trail access would be down through this area. And basically, there's a large grade differential. It's almost 20 feet down through there. And when we started looking at that, we have, this existing pond down here. We've got the brand new public street up here that is absolutely as low as we can because we've designed it coming down as fast as we can to make it a safe public road. Basically, that ended up with about a 20-foot grade differential. Those lots are over 200 foot deep, so it was almost 10%. We think there's ways to manage that slope to maybe get it down to 8%, but typically we don't design any trails over 5% because we just see it as potential safety hazard. If it's a steeper slope and somebody's riding a bike or something and it's a little bit icy or slick, there's a potential for somebody to get hurt on it, potential for liability. So our engineering recommendation was on that north end, trail access would just be steeper than we would recommend as an engineering, design, just because we wouldn't want to assume liability for something that's steeper than what like an ADA accessible sidewalk would be, which would be 5%, and this would almost be double that.
Can I ask you a professional question on that then?
Yep.
I think I know the answer, but I get that you don't want to assume liability on it. And yet we kind of knew there needed to be a north trail. Why even develop it like you did if you knew you couldn't get a trail in there?
So my understanding is Clive, they want to see a trail connection within a quarter mile of all the lots, correct?
Yes, that's been the guidance so far.
Sure. So that would be a fourth trail connection for this development. So there's 3 other trail connections for this development.
For the one we're looking at right now?
Yep.
Step in.
Sure.
I can speak to that piece a little bit here. Here, let me pop this up for you.
And while Brian is getting that set up, I can briefly address the grade change. That is the existing condition with the creek already being lower. So in order for the site to be developable, you are going to have that grade change. There's not really a way to lower to that point. There are some construction options that would allow you to get the trail portions down to the 5% is the recommended. 8.3 is also an allowed grade for those facilities over certain lengths. So there are design options you can do, making it more curvy as it goes down, adding landings to break up the grade to kind of get a flat point so you don't exceed those lengths. But it is quite possible that in order to achieve that, the city may end up having to put retaining walls on these neighboring properties because their own backyards have that significant grade change. So that is a potential. But I will let Brian get back to talking about where those connection points are. And I will say at this point, staff, based on the feedback we've had from you and the Plan and Zoning Commission, our stance at this point would be to leave the trail connection shown and see if it is constructible when we get to the full construction drawing details and what that impact would be on those lots at that time. So I will let Brian kind of talk about where those trail locations are.
Yeah, I want to address Mike's concern. So Brian McMurray, Vista Real Estate, 2400 86th Street, Urbandale, Iowa. Obviously you've heard the concern about the slope, potential liability issues. Amanda just brought up another concern, which is sort of increased cost of making that slope work, whether it's retaining walls, that sort of thing. Also something the developer is considering when we're making this request. But most importantly, to get to Mike's question there, we believe that 3 trail connections is consistent with the access provided in the other Shadow Creek plats, 3 through 8. And just to kind of give you an idea here, I've put up a map. That red is the proposed location of the trail, and you kind of see the northern half of our Shadow Creek West development there. We believe that we've met the policies that the city follows in regards to the quarter-mile distance. And I think staff is in agreement on this. The lots at the very north that would be furthest away from our trail connection on the south. And I'll show you that real quick here. So I can push this up. So we're going to have a trail connection here on the south between lots 49 and 50 that comes down here. But then we also have connections at our entrances onto the 8-foot trail on Warrior Lane. And that trail will come down to a connection here on the far south of our development and also one on the very north that you see up here. So right now we're looking at a city request of 4 connections. We believe 3 is consistent with access provided in other plats. And then to give you an idea of the distance, these lots up here that are furthest from that southern internal connection would be a quarter mile to take the Warrior Lane trail up north. Now, we do understand that Warrior Lane is not improved yet, but also the trail isn't in yet. And there may be a period of time between when the trail is constructed and when Warrior Lane is ultimately improved that we need to account for access and give the residents access to that trail. So I think the developers realized the importance of that, and that's one of the reasons they're willing to put that trail connection in on the south. If you look at that period of time where those lots at the north would have to use the southern trail connection, that would be temporary. And they would have to travel about 1/3 of a mile instead of 1/4 of a mile. So for a temporary period of time, we're talking about a 1/20th of a mile difference, again, temporary. And, you know, with the slope issues and everything else, that's kind of why we're making the request to get rid of that northern connection there.
Other questions? Susan? Srikant?
I was wondering, so that does make a little more sense as far as the trail connections, and I understand, you know, the concern about safety, obviously, with that northern trail connection grade. But I know one of the other things we asked about during this last discussion was around, you know, a small park or something nearby for those residents. Is that something that was considered?
Yeah, so that goes back to that the Parkland dedication requirement has been met. The city council in the past has approved those development agreements with the intent that this property would not have that Parkland dedication due to the layout and grade concerns that we knew would be a problem when they tried to do the site layout. I don't want to speak for the Parks Department, but I don't know that they would want, you know, an acre parcel of land in this particular area that they would have to get to and maintain. It probably would end up being somewhat similar to the Westview Bend Park over on the east side of town that isn't really greatly utilized. It's kind of down a weird slope. And, you know, we've heard that the community through the neighborhood planning process isn't really thrilled with that park, and it doesn't get a lot of use, and they would like to see something different. So realistically, if you were to try to put a playground type park in this development, it would end up being something similar to that, that really wouldn't get the utilization that would align with the maintenance needs that the city would have to do long term.
Okay.
And a little bit to Amanda's comments, and we do have the pond that will be there and the trail around it. And so that'll be a city owned and city maintained property that, again, isn't maybe a formal park space, but will definitely be an informal park space in the future that will be maintaining and will be under city control, where that main segment of trail and other improvements could happen.
What's the closest park via the trail?
The closest one right now would be what is under construction or will soon be under construction or design for the linear park over here, the Circina Parkway. There's also the city's future parkland up here with a yet to be determined design. And then I know Waukees Triumph Park is over this direction generally. So there are facilities in the area, and this use of the greenbelt land to make the park space, you can see from this map, is consistent with how the expectation has been done throughout Shadow Creek South, North, and then even our older development area that's on the east side of Alice's. So you can see from this, there isn't really another park, except Canary Park is generally over in this area as well. We also do anticipate with the future development of these still agricultural parcels that this Circina Park that is shown here will lead to a larger like neighborhood park that would have those kind of playground amenities.
And so, sorry, so I'm still not quite following. So basically the bottom line is there a way for folks in the Shadow Creek West development area to be able to follow the trail in order to get to, you know, one of these other parks? And if so, I mean, what kind of distance are we talking about roughly? I mean, just general numbers.
Yeah, so right now, there aren't really any nearby parks in this area in Clive. Canary Park would be the closest. That one, you're probably looking about a mile as the crow flies. So once the trail is extended, which it is not yet across Alice's here through the Greenbelt area, you would be able to get on that and take the trail connecting into this area for when this is developed and this is developed. And then it would also extend up into this area when this future park is developed. All right, I'll let Richard take over.
Thought maybe I jump up here real quick and kind of articulate some of the way we're looking at this from a park standpoint and how this will serve the residents that live in this area. So while this is generally a large green belt, we also will look at this as a larger linear park. So this park is going to have the trail, it's going to have the fishing areas. And then as we look at future development of this, we'll look at areas maybe where there's small play elements or little things like that. So this whole green belt will serve as the park for this neighborhood, for those residents that live here. And I feel confident with the land that we have and are going to have that we'll be able to serve these neighbors really, really well in a way that a lot of the people in the surrounding areas don't have access to this extensive of a green belt. I mean, just right out their backyards, they have over 150 acres just right on this map here that will be available for park use, whether it's hiking, walking, riding your bike, fishing. And then we'll look in the future about possibilities of maybe adding amenities. We've talked internally about maybe working with residents to see if they want to do like fishing piers on those ponds for better access to the ponds, things like that. So I feel very confident with the land that we have here on this, that we serve the residents very, very well.
So Richard, just a quick follow-up on that, and I appreciate that additional clarification, but with the pond area specifically, you know, that kind of that retention basin.
Yeah.
Is that where you're talking about in the future, talking to residents in that area to say, you know, hey, do we put a couple of, you know, like you said, a pier or maybe even like a small, you know, kids center or something, obviously not too close to the lake, but or the retention basin, I should say. Is that something?
It could be honestly, it could be anywhere through there. You know, one of the really cool things about this, you have this, I mean, it's probably about 1.5 miles of Little Walnut Creek here that's protected and really provides great opportunities to do some really unique and interesting things. And it may be a small shelter near the pond, or maybe it's a couple nodes of natural play elements along the trail there. So it provides us kind of limitless opportunities to do something really unique in ways that as these people move into here, that we can start to work with them and say, what's valuable to you along here? Do you want the trail? You know, are there spaces that you'd want more developed, or maybe we mow a little bit more grass along the top of that pond? Or do you want us to develop some nature trails through some of these areas? So I think there's just unlimited possibilities that we can do here. And like Amanda talked about, we have Circina Park that's coming on board. We're going to be doing some planning work for the park along Alice's Road here in the next year or two. So a lot of opportunities for us to really engage with the people that are living here and moving in here and doing some really cool stuff.
Richard, this gives us some flexibility to get feedback from the neighborhood and residents on future development of these amenities and really where it goes. I know we've had that policy for years as we've develop Cart Park and others as we get that community feedback. So this will be in line with what we've done before. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are just probably in the next few weeks going to be getting some of the revised concepts for Sixtina Park that we'll be meeting with neighbors on. We'll start to invite people as part of that planning process for the trail, as well as that park up there along Alice's Road. So in the coming years, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to give us some feedback and guidance on this space.
Okay.
Michael?
Yeah.
Great. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just gonna say, thank you for the clarification.
The only part about that clarification makes me nervous is that we'll have the neighborhood decide if a trail goes through or anything like that, right?
No.
It's kind of the brunt of this whole thing. What we hear later is, you know, never knew a trail was going there. Or we don't want a trail, knew it was designed for a trail, but 5 years later, we don't want a trail in our backyard, or we don't want a trail in this neighborhood at all. And then it pushes that issue to us again. So when you don't do something today, waiting 3, 5, 10 years just complicates things 10 times when it comes to things like that.
No, 100% agree. We would love to be doing construction of the trail here this year and into next year. We just, because of the sewer line with Waukee, we're just not able to get in there and do it right away. So we're going to be in there as soon as possible. And all the promotional materials for these developments have advertised this as park and advertised it as having the trail there. And probably the most common question I get is, when is that trail going in? I get emails probably weekly from people that say, we're going to move into Shadow Creek. Can you tell me when this trail's going in? We're looking at retiring here from the Minneapolis area. When is that trail going in? So that's just from the feedback I get from people moving in, buying lots here. That's an amenity they're aware of and they know, and they're excited for it to be there.
So Richard, to Mike's point, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
To Mike's point, that is valid, and people have some concerns about that. As long as we're giving that expectation up front, and it's gonna be built on city land, and it's, you know, people don't like surprises. So as long as we're communicating that out and they understand what's coming, sounds to me like folks want to see it sooner rather than later too.
I would say that's the comment I get most often out of that. If you go up there and grab one of the promotional flyers out of the mailbox up there on Westgate, you'll see that they have the trail very, very highly denoted on there. So it's very clear that people know that that's coming.
I
We
think
get a lot of
that's
those
why it
calls as well.
What's that?
We get a lot of those calls as well down in community development.
That's why I think we need to make a decision on that north trail, whether it's going in or not. And if it's going in, we need to make it known it's going in, and not maybe later it's going in, because maybe later is going to be an absolute no to those houses that live right next to the trail that's going to split their yard. And so whether we do it or don't do it, fine, right? But it needs to be decided, and not a maybe in 10 years.
Yeah,
So
I'll just echo that I agree with what Mike was just saying, and Eric as well, as far as, you know, people don't like surprises. So let's just, you know, I know it sounds like we're already doing this as far as just making sure it's clear that this is the path that the trail is going to be on, and giving that information as much as possible up front. But yeah, to Mike's point as well on that northern trail piece, that would be that's something that we should let people know one way or the other.
So Amanda, can you help me on the slope, the 5% versus 10%? I don't have a frame of reference for that. So my neighborhood, Wellington Ridge, we have a trail that starts high, goes pretty darn steep into Campbell Park. You know what I'm talking about? It cuts through a bunch of backyards. It kicks my butt going up every time I have to come back from the Greenbelt, right? I'm exhausted. What would that percentage be?
I don't know offhand what that percentage would be. It is most likely in excess of the 5% grade. To kind of help put that into perspective, a target design on a parking lot is about 2% grade. So it's mostly flat, but lets the water flow. So that kind of helps you identify flat sidewalks, things of that nature, usually around that 5%. So that probably is exceeding that. Staff is not
that dangerous.
Yeah, staff's not concerned about the dangerous nature of that. It would still be designed and installed in accordance with SUDAS and the PROAG and ADA accessibility guidelines, which do allow for exceeding that 5% grade through different design circumstances. over certain lengths. So we aren't overly concerned with exceeding the 5%
Long enough
grade.
Distance, like
Mhm.
where I'm talking about in Wellington Ridge, I mean, that's a pretty good distance.
And that's part of it
Yeah.
for that one is that is a long distance
Right.
where it probably
It's a great
averages out,
Mhm.
you know, because it flattens out there. It might average out across that entire span. I don't want to say 5% or less, but it's not going to average. That first bit, you know, is a little bit of severe drop, and then it kind
Right.
of flattens out, and then it goes subtly back down again as you get to
But I
Campbell.
mean, I've had my kids riding their bikes on that for years
Mhm.
and never had any concern about it.
That's why they have those design flexibilities, because if you can have that extended distance
Yeah.
you can average out that percentage a little bit. So, I mean, it's definitely something, as Amanda alluded to, in the construction drawing process, where we definitely want to, I think we're hearing from the council, we definitely want to give that a go and try to see if we can make that work. But understand that the developers are also saying that we've met your requirement, and that's potentially additional cost. So again, that's going to be the battle through the plating process here and the costs that are associated with it. So
One
just
thing,
be clear on that.
sorry,
Go ahead, Shrikant.
Wow.
I just wanted to add that, you know, I understand that there's the trail connections along Warrior Lane, and, you know, we're going to see that developed out. And that's, you know, that's a little more concerning, at least for, you know, parents sending their kids out along, you know, more of a thoroughfare, right? So I think, you know, that's part of what I'm thinking in that process is, you know, how do we make those trail connections as safe as possible? And I understand you know, the grade issue is also a safety concern, but I think, I don't remember who mentioned this, but I think there was talk that could be reduced down to an 8% grade.
Yes. So there are different categories of allowances in there. You can also go beyond that 8.3%. That's just probably the next one we would get to that we think that the trail could probably be designed for. So I wouldn't really consider it to be a safety concern. It is truly more of a constructability concern and what kind of impact you want to have on those adjacent lots. So I want to real quick just kind of lay out how the entitlement process works so everyone understands. There's been some concern raised about people not knowing there's going to be a trail there or not. So the rezoning is the first step in the entitlement process. The developer has also already submitted their preliminary plat, and that has gone through Planning and Zoning Commission. And then assuming the rezoning is ultimately approved at the third consideration, that would be brought forward for your consideration at the same time. So then the next step would be preparation of the construction drawings. They can't really fully prepare and submit construction drawings until we have that preliminary plat process largely figured out, because that's where we're getting down to the very detailed grading considerations. That also comes before you for approval of those construction drawings, typically on your consent agenda. So if you wanted, that could come back before you as an action item to make a final determination on the trail. At that point, we should know what is necessary to grade that trail platform in such a way that it could be constructed. So this is not our last touch on this by any means. This can come back before you again. But I would also like to additionally add that our standard practice has been that the developer is responsible for creating the platform for the future trail surfacing. And then the city comes in and actually constructs those improvements. So if we start talking about retaining walls and things of that nature, we would have to discuss how those physical improvements, who was responsible for those and how they were paid for. So it is certainly possible that that might be necessary in order to make those grades work to get a trail through this area.
All right. Well, I'm nervous about that process for the developer's sake, right? They move on down the road that far and suddenly, you know, this council says, and they've done all this design work and construction, you know, drawings and all that. And 3 phases down, we say no. They've got tens of thousands of dollars wrapped into this thing prior to us saying that. I get it as the risk, but when we're sitting here talking about that might be a major issue, we should probably try to figure this out prior to them spending that kind of money on developing something that is going to be said no to anyways, but anyway.
Yeah, so at this point, then it would be up to you guys to give us direction. If you think the trail connection is vitally important, that you would be willing to have, landings or switchbacks or potentially a retaining walls, anything like that. But you can build it. There is always a way to build something if you want to spend enough money. It is if you want to have that kind of impact.
It's hard to make that decision right now, not knowing what that
Right.
looks like. Right?
So we can either say today, okay, the trail isn't likely to work, or it's going to have a bigger impact on these lots next to it. We don't want that. So we'll be okay with just the trail connection to the south and the other connections out to Warrior Lane. Or you can say, this is really important and we want the developer to go do that due diligence through the construction drawings and see what would be necessary to actually put that trail platform in.
One thing I would offer, Your Honor, too, is some of these points may be a moot discussion until we get to the Warrior Lane assessment piece. And so I would say is you don't necessarily need to provide direction yet. I think that discussion probably needs to come now, because all of these things may be moot if we can't come to an agreement on that particular item. This development may completely change. And so I would offer that we can definitely come back to this one, but I would offer we probably should jump into the Warrior Lane discussion, because that changes. That's probably the biggest question mark that's outstanding before we could even staff recommend moving forward with anything that you see on the screen.
So
That makes
shall we
sense.
Proceed with that one.
That's what I would recommend, Your Honor.
Okay. Amanda, are you leading that as well?
I am. So there is one other item, though, I did need to bring back to you guys for follow-up on that I think would be better to do real quick before we jump into Warrior Lane. And that was the landscape buffer alternative design. As Matt had said, that would be dependent on the future conversation, but I think it'll be hard to circle back to once we get into the weeds here. So the applicant has provided a typical section for what they were envisioning for the landscape buffer. We talked at the last meeting that they were looking at doing something different than the underlying zoning requirements for those 30-foot buffers. Staff does believe that this is an improvement to the current buffering requirements. It is going to have fewer trees. You can see it starts to bring in some of these other enhanced features like the wall and edging that would complement those entry feature signage. And it does still provide, you can see from the aerial and the elevation views, it does still provide a good amount of coverage there. This is probably an estimate on the cost about $100,000 more across the development for the landscaping expense than doing the typical buffer requirement. So staff is supportive of this alternative. Planning and Zoning Commission also considered this alternative and said that they would be supportive of it as well, pending council's direction on if we should allow that through the zoning change and development agreement. So I know at the last conversation, you guys weren't sure since we didn't have a typical at that point to show you. So this is kind of the design intent there. So just getting direction from you, assuming we move forward, that this is something, whether or not you'd be interested in seeing a buffer like this through the process, or if you prefer the standard requirements.
Do we have a consensus?
How big are the gaps in between, like the groupings of trees and what have you? I mean, is it a true buffer?
I would consider it to be a buffer. You are going to be able to see through it at times. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And also keeping in mind that Warrior Lane improvement is, 10 years plus potentially down the road. So the trees will have that length of time to mature into themselves. So even if they plant the little 6-foot evergreen today, which I believe their intent with this is that the size at planting is larger than the minimum to kind of establish that buffer a little better, since these would be higher end homes. But they would have time to mature into that. So you're not going to have massive gaps. You can see they're using some other landscaping materials in the vicinity of the kind of overstory trees. It will help fill in where your view line would be, since those trees are the type with the crown that's up above you.
Just a diversity of different types of trees.
Yes.
Staff's recommendation on this?
I greatly prefer this to our typical requirement. I think it would be a great enhancement for the development.
Susan? Go
Why
ahead.
so?
I think largely that our current buffer is over treed. For instance, we have it's per 30 feet. A lot of those require 2 overstory trees to be planted within that 30 feet. Typical overstory tree has a 40-foot spread. So you need to plant them 20 foot on center at minimum. You cannot plant 40 foot of tree in a 30-foot buffer. So that's just mathematically, I don't think it's the best long-term for the health of the trees that we're planting. And I actually have our intern doing quite a bit of research on our landscaping requirements right now to hopefully bring back to you guys at some point for some revisions. We are also finding through that and some conversations we've been having with like the district forester and some of the garden centers around, that as we're seeing changes in weather patterns and climatic changes, particularly with the more extreme cold and more extreme heat, that those USDA growth zones were only based on the extreme cold temperature. And though our maximum temps are rising, that is causing a significant issue for evergreen trees. They are not, most of them that used to be planted are no longer viable. So we are getting, depending on who you talk to, anywhere from 3 to 6 species that are currently being recommended. And our buffer requirements and site requirements are requiring typically at least 25% of evergreens to be planted. And we are finding on every single inspection, all the dead trees are always evergreen. So I think we're just going to have to start shifting to that, and this would be more in conformance with getting some of that higher design in a way that I think will be best for the long-term health of the landscaping that's put in.
Shrikant, Susan, any objection to the staff recommendation? Again, this is an extra 100,000 the developer were put in to make an improvement here.
I'm supportive.
Shrikant?
Yeah, I have no concerns about that.
So it seems we have consensus on that one, Amanda.
Great.
Now to the next one.
Okay, now we're on to the fun one for the Warrior Lane costs. So the developer is requesting some assistance here with the Warrior Lane assessment. So our policy from you all has been that the developer pays the cost, the opinion of probable cost prepared by our engineer at the time of final plat for the development for any of the roadway improvements that they were not constructing themselves. For instance, Meredith, Warrior, those kinds of roads. So predating me, thankfully, I know there had been some issues with assessments to property owners after the fact, I believe on Meredith. That is always difficult to 10 or 15 years down the road, go back and assess the property owner rather than getting the funds up front. So our first thing would be confirming that council's direction is still that we want to have those funds up front for the full obligation.
I'm seeing heads nod online. Susan, Shrikant? I can see Susan nodding. I can't
Great.
see you nodding, Shrikant.
Yeah, my still picture doesn't let me do that, but yes, I'm nodding as well.
One thing to clarify on that too is that the amount of road that we're talking, it isn't for the full arterial road costs. It is half of a 31-foot kind of local road obligation.
Yes. So we are limited to only being able to charge the developer for what is directly kind of able to be assigned to the property. So in this case, it is a residential development. So a local road cost is what is attributable to that development. So they would not be paying the cost based on the 3-lane urban section. They would be paying the cost based on half of a local road, which in the metro generally is considered to be anything 31 foot or narrower. So our opinion of probable cost is based on that 31 foot or 15.5 feet. They would only be responsible for the portion of the road that is their half of the right of way. And then in this case, the other half is not Clive, it's Waukee. So that makes it really clear for that one. So then what we have before you is the total cost of the obligation is a problem for the developer. In this case, they'd like some assistance on that. They're requesting that they pay a per lot cost rather than a per linear foot cost, which is how those are typically done. So we do have the assessment from the Shadow Creek Plat 6 and Plat 9 that the developer did pay in 2021. That was $268.29 per foot. And we have adjusted that based on the more recent bid numbers we got with the Harbach reconstruction and find that today we're probably around $377.25 a foot for the construction costs. In this case, there is over 2,600 linear feet because as you've seen on the plans here, dock cam's not up, but it's a long and skinnier development. It is not as deep. So the configuration, the way it lays out, it does have more street frontage than some other similarly sized developments that would have to be paid for as part of this. So what we're really looking for from council tonight is direction on if there are creative ways you want us to look into meeting that obligation. There is some precedent for this. The Woodlands Creek Reserve plat, at the time of the plat, the developer paid a portion of those roadway costs. And then the remaining $2,500 per lot was actually paid by the building permit fees. So the difference there is the developer of the subdivision, in this case in particular, is not the builder of the homes. Vista does not construct homes. They just do the development and then sell the lots. So their concern is they don't get that full increase in value. They're only capturing the lot value. So that could be an option. One of the other things that staff could think of that we could consider would be the, quote unquote, extra taxes that the city would receive based on the fact that these are going to be higher end homes and they will have greater assessed value per acre than our target development goals are. Right now, we target $1 million per acre, and we've seen at least 1.2 million being constructed in the Shadow Creek South area per acre. We don't have that fully. The assessments for a lot of those properties are still partial assessments, so we can't give a for sure what that current assessed value per acre is, since those homes are all not completely built and constructed. They don't have full valuations yet. We do know that our construction valuation that goes on the permit fee that's based on the building code tables does tend to be low for the purchase price and assessed values in Clive, at least by 25%. So we also can't really use that number to estimate our per acre, but we do know we have already exceeded that $1 million per acre for that development. And we would expect this one to exceed that by as much or possibly more. So that could be a consideration. So I will also turn it over. I think Brian was going to discuss this a little bit more to bring clarity to what exactly the request is. But that's really the policy direction we're looking for from you guys is there alternatives to a strictly cash payment at the time of the final plat to help make up this full obligation?
Amanda, quick question. How many lots are there along that, or at least in the proposed, design along that frontage area?
There are 88 lots total, and there would be sorry, I'm counting. I believe 26.
26. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Brian McMurray, Vista Real Estate, 2486 Urbandale. Thank you, Amanda. So yeah, what we're kind of left with here is this 2,600 linear feet along a long narrow development with only 88 lots. One quick little background here. The reason this is coming up right now at the rezoning stage is because if the city does decide to offer aid with this Warrior Lane assessment, whatever solutions we come up with today would likely find their way into the development agreement that goes along with the zoning change and could potentially result in a couple of tweaks to the preliminary plat as well. So, and the reason you're hearing about this now for the first time and not at the previous meeting is we were in extensive discussions with staff trying to get a better grasp on the numbers. We're confident in our request today and that's what we need in order to make the project work. We didn't want to come to council with a request without knowing that it was necessary and to what extent. If the council does not determine that you're able to help the developer, obviously they would need to reconsider the project as a whole, whether or not it's feasible. Unfortunately, some of the solutions that we're coming up with to make the city aid more palatable to the city would need to go away. Things like the increased lot size, increased square footage requirements, all the enhanced landscaping that we're showing, those are kind of solutions for this problem that we're facing. I'll get into that in a little bit. But that stuff would probably go. We'd likely need to look into, we might need to look into a higher density product, perhaps sitting on the land, maybe even selling it at some point. These are all things we'd really like to avoid. We're really excited about this project. We're very proud about what we've accomplished out there so far. I think that our architectural review committee just done a great job of kind of controlling the curb out there, creating more value for the city. So we're just going to be asking you for your help here to kind of finish out our last single family area with a bang. You know, if there's something the city wants to see here, we think that we've proven we're the team for the job and we'd like to get going on it. So a couple things that I think are relevant here. As Amanda mentioned, we're kind of looking at this as a per lot cost. That doesn't mean it can't be broken down any other way. If you can turn that into a per linear foot cost if you want as well. But the reason we're looking at it per lot is because we have experience with an assessment for Warrior Lane just on the west side of the road. We own the development on the west in Waukee. It's our Ashley Acres development. So we were assessed for our half of the improvements on that side. And when we look at the lots in that development, we end up about $2,100 per lot fee for the Warrior Lane improvements. $2,100 a lot.
How long ago was that?
That was very recently. You want to give me a time? Last year?
A decade ago in construction dollars.
Oh, for sure. But on a per lot basis, $2,100 a lot. On our side of the street in Shadow Creek 9, we were about $2,500 a lot. In Shadow Creek 6, about $1,000 a lot. So with these 88 lots in our Shadow Creek West development, we're looking at anywhere from $8,000 to $13,000 per lot. And that's just a barrier that we don't feel that we can overcome. So we're not asking for zero assessment. $3,000 would be the most we've ever paid anywhere. But we believe that that's a reasonable request. Kind of tied hand in hand with that. We're kind of looking at some past projects we've done. I've had some conversations with other cities in the Des Moines Metro. I think talking about what other cities are doing might not be fully relevant. Clive is Clive. Clive does what Clive does. But I think the reason why other cities are doing what they're doing is relevant and important here. So a couple projects that we've had, our Kings Landing development in West Des Moines. We were bordered on the south by Boonville Road, on the north by Stagecoach. The city came up with some creative ideas to fund those projects and did not charge the developer for those roads. In Norwalk, we had a similar issue where we had a lot of frontage along Beardsley. Norwalk decided not to charge us for that road. And I think there's a lot of reasons that the cities have for doing this. In those two situations, similar to this, we were looking at sort of a higher end executive lot style development. And I think both those cities saw value in that. Having a place to bring people when they visit, a place that attracts business owners to build their homes, potentially bring their businesses to town, higher taxable value, all of those things that the cities see when they see a development like this coming into play. But one theme that I've noticed in those situations and also in my conversations with other cities over the past month or so here about this topic is that they have trouble justifying charging a neighboring property owner 100% of the cost for an improvement that has such a high traffic. When it's an arterial road that serves the entire community, a lot of these cities don't feel that it's appropriate to charge the property owner 100%. So what you'll see is situations like we had in West Des Moines and Norwalk where we weren't charged at all. You'll also see communities like your neighbor Urbandale. I believe they just increased their per linear foot assessment 50%. I think they're seeing kind of the same cost increases that we're all seeing, but they increased that 50% up to $193 a foot. That's a substantial difference from the $377 that we're talking about here in Clive. And I think that goes back to that underlying theme of not charging the neighboring property owner 100% when the impact they have is so insignificant on that roadway compared to the actual traffic that it sees. So they're really just getting help from the developer to pay for a portion of that road and covering the rest through other means. The 88 lots is an important thing because the amount of frontage with the small amount of lots is what puts us in this situation. And I think the amount of lots speaks directly to the impact that the development has on the road. So, in our Ashley Acres development in Waukee, we had more lots, more impact. The city's going to charge us more because there's a greater impact, but the project is still feasible because that cost is able to be spread amongst a much larger number of lots. I believe we had 193 lots in that development. So those are, I guess, comparisons or considerations that would be kind of a topic of fairness and just kind of what we've done before and what we see in the area right now. But there are also a lot of benefits to the city, and Amanda, I think, hit on one of the most important ones, and that is the us exceeding the target valuation. So as she stated, we're targeted $1 million per acre. We've already exceeded that in our Shadow Creek Plat 4 development, and that's with partial assessments. So, if that ends up being anywhere from 1.2 where it is now up to 1.5, with some of the solutions we're coming up with to make this work, we think just Shadow Creek West is going to be valued even higher. And, if it's 1.5, that's $30 million more a year than was anticipated. And so we're hopeful that we can be recognized for that, I guess, given some credit for that in some way, and that the city's able to look at that as a way to kind of obtain those funds. This road is on a 10 to 15 year horizon. So with this additional taxable value in all of our other plats and the highest being in this piece of it, we would hope that the city would be able to attain the funds necessary to cover the difference between what we pay up front and what you'll need to actually complete the improvements 10 to 15 years from now. So yeah, I guess as Amanda stated, we're asking for $3,000 a lot. There's a lot of other numbers involved. I'm happy to share it, but I guess I'll open it up for any questions or comments. So right now.
Questions, Ted?
Sure. So I certainly understand where you're coming from. We're all needing to, cut costs where we can. And certainly, I think we want to be creative and we want to work with you. I don't think it's accurate to say that we're passing on the full cost to the homeowners because we are talking about today's dollars versus 10 years down the line. And it doesn't have to be the 377. I think we've talked about the 268 number. And again, what's that number going to look like in 10 to 15 years? Who knows? But that's certainly not passing that full cost on to the homeowner. Where my biggest concern is that I think it's much better to be upfront with the future homeowner with their pricing, be transparent with their pricing by embedding those costs upfront as opposed to backloading it 10 years down the line with a special assessment.
Oh, we're not proposing that at all. I think you would avoid a special assessment entirely. A couple of the solutions that we're talking about are to, I guess you'd say, ensure that the valuations produced from this development allow the city to collect that tax increment over time, I guess. The debt service you would collect would help you obtain the funds necessary to build the road. There would be no special assessment to the residents at all. That's not how that would happen. And as far as what they pay, there's different ways to cut it. And that 88 lots and the amount of frontage is what hurts us here. But if that cost of Warrior Lane is passed directly to the home buyer, let's say, the greater the number of lots, the lower that number is, and it keeps it doesn't hinder sales. It keeps homes somewhat affordable.
These are executive lots, and you pass on $5,000 to $8,000 on that additional lot.
That's not the only additional cost, though, that we're dealing with here. I mean, just like you guys, we're dealing with increased costs of labor, materials.
But that's what we're actually talking about here is that cost. Though, right? And then that's being passed on to the future homeowner. So again, it's embedded on the front end so they know what their they're paying for, as opposed to.
And there's
trying-
two ways with that, the passing to the homeowner and then also the developer just.
Or, and the
taking on
builder,
that
right? And
cost,
I'm
yeah.
totally open to being creative, like Amanda talked about, where maybe you pay a portion of it, the builder pays a portion of it. But again, all of that then is front loaded so that the buyer knows what they're paying for at that point.
Yeah, and I was just more speaking to where those costs end up. It could end up with the homeowner, but 13 grand a lot, along with all the other costs, it makes it a barrier that we can't overcome. Or the developer can retain that cost, but has more lots to sell. So is able to kind of make the project feasible.
Sure.
In this case, we have 2,600 linear feet of road and only 88 lots to do it. So whether the developer takes it on or passes it on to the homeowner is kind of irrelevant to solving our issue that we're running into here. That said, I think, trying to overcome these obstacles, we come up with some solutions that create an opportunity here to create a really special development with landscaping and increased square footage requirements, that kind of
But
stuff.
Brian, we all realize this is a business for you, right? And
For sure.
you got to make money. But to say that you're going to assume the 8,000, 10,000, it's going to the homeowner one way or the other. You're going to price that lot to cover, the builder is going to price to cover, and the owner is going to pay one way or the other. It's going to get paid for by the owner. I mean, let's just be clear that the semantics is.
There are limits, though. You can't
I
only
get
sell a
that.
lot
I
for
get
so much.
I get that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ted.
No, go ahead. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I hear you, but we're not having a hard time. I work in real estate. We're not having a hard time selling lots these days, right? And I don't know exactly what your timing is to get this on the market, but in this location, you're not gonna have a hard time getting rid of these lots.
And that's one of our points to the city is I think looking at our past plats, that you would have the trust in us. We're not going to have a hard time getting rid of these lots. So if it is valued so much higher than your target valuation, we hope that instill the confidence in you that you're going to be able to collect that through property taxes in a way that helps you pay the difference between what we pay up front and what you still need to obtain to put these improvements in.
Sorry to interrupt. I did see that Dave raised his hand. He's also with Vista.
Yeah.
He's just not able to be here.
One moment, Dave. Dave, this is Pete. You should be able to unmute yourself and start your video at this time.
Okay. I'm not sure you want to see me on video. I'm unfortunately having my first bout of COVID and can't be there tonight, which I'm disappointed for that. But look, you guys probably don't want to hear this, but Clive is by far the most expensive place to develop. And Ted, I know you are in the real estate business and I can appreciate your comments, but there is a limit to where you can pass on costs to the end user. And with the market headwinds that we're going to experience now, and we already are, we're having, we work hard to pre-sell our lots, and we're already getting a number of builders that are backing out of their commitments. And this just really comes down to a risk paradigm for us that is this going to be worth the risk that we're going to try to do this type of a development, a high-end development, which we've been very successful at in the past, but is the risk too great for us to try to achieve this? And this has always been our goal, is to do this kind of higher end exclusive development in this location with our 10-year plan. And we're out ahead of that. Unfortunately, again, we have these headwinds coming at us, and it's going to create a risk that just might not work for us. And in fact, I don't think it can. If we were to pay anything close to 8, even 13,000 a lot, there's just no way you're going to be able to pass that on in today's market or 2 or 3 years from now, in my opinion. I wish we could do that, but when you look at some of the costs that we've already absorbed in our previous plats with the aggregate under the roads and with the costs of the soil restoration and all those things, we're already $12,000-$14,000 more a lot than any of our other developments of the exact same character in across the street in Waukee, anywhere. And we develop in almost all 17 communities here in town. And it's just, we're just asking for some consideration. We think the city's going to benefit in the long run with this development being in place. And we're just asking for some help to give us the courage to move it forward, basically, during these times. And we don't think it's an unreasonable request by any means, because it's just it's an excessive cost to try to bear.
How much are these lots we're talking about? Projected sales of a lot? What is your, approximate cost, your top 2-3 lots?
Well, our top lots, Mike, are it'd probably be in the 250,000 range. I would say we could get more if we didn't have to wipe out all the trees that we've had to wipe out to get the grades to work. But you're not talking about that many lots. The majority of the lots are internal, and we are trying to do a larger lot. So those internal lots, we think we'll get in the 110 to 125 range, depending where they're located.
You're still looking at $500,000 homes then at that price.
Oh,
point.
no. I would say these homes are probably going to start at 800.
Well, I was going to say, that's a minimum, right? Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think they're going to be, I think you're seeing a minimum. When we first tried to convince the council, and I think many of you were on it back when we tried to do this in this architectural review committee, the goal that you guys wanted was 450,000 a house. We're probably exceeding 600 a house on our previous plat. So, and I think this one will be, this one could be 900 to $1 million on average. It's just, who knows where, some of that's driven by the costs that we all hope will come down, but I don't know that that's realistic.
That's where I'm struggling, Dave. If you can get to $800,000 a house, passing on an $8,000 additional fee to cover the road we know's got to go in, and we're still going to wind up covering more of those costs down the road. I just don't, you got to help me understand why you can't pass that on.
Well, I don't think you can. We've been told that we can pass things on all along. And unfortunately, when we did plats 3 and 4 in Shadow Creek, our first 2 plats there, you guys had put an ordinance on us for that rock and the soil, and we had already pre-sold a bunch of lots. So we ended up getting clipped on that because we couldn't go back and add price to those. Would we been able to do it? I don't know. I just think there's a limit to what you can do in passing it along. And I also think I'm nervous about the marketplace. When we see builders back away, this will be my 3rd time we've been through this in our 40-year history. I'm a little nervous about it. And it just becomes a risk where we just don't do the project at this time. And we maybe look for an alternative use, which is disappointing to me, because I said this was going to be the crown jewel of our development there. And we think that the city will easily recoup the cost to do this. I think the other argument that hasn't been really discussed much is, there has to be a proportional benefit to charge somebody for a cost off-site. And when you look at 88 residents' traffic patterns going up and down Warrior, it can't be 5 or 10% of that traffic. And that's why a lot of the cities waive those requirements or don't have them, like Grimes, because they don't see that there's a proportional benefit. So this 15.5-foot requirement has never been challenged by the development community, and trust me, it's been discussed. But most of the time, what happens is when it makes a project that's not feasible, then the city considers it and tries to make an accommodation for us. And we've seen that on our developments, and we've seen it with other developers. So I know you might believe that, and that's fair. That's your opinion. I know what my opinion is. We're not in here begging for dollars. We've developed 580 lots to date in this development, and we've fought a couple of ordinances We fought to control our own curb, but we really haven't come in here and asked or begged for anything. Well, we are asking for help here because of the marketplace and the volatility that we're going to experience. And it's just, again, we're trying to help with our risk on this development.
Michael?
I just want to clear up a couple of things, Dave. I appreciate it, your comments and such. I do, multiple lanes on Warrior. I mean, if this was built anywhere else, there would have to be a road for these 88 houses, right? For them to
That's right.
travel. So just because it's Warrior Lane, we are giving you the proportionate what that would be if it was Maple or Delwood or something like that. That's all we're charging you. So that argument to me is stretched when you talk about it, because we're still only charging you for a Delwood or a Maple and only your half at that point. The other argument I have, or the issue I have with your argument is, boy, I can't believe seeing those lots, and as beautiful as that is, that some of your lots are going to be $140,000. Berkshire North, again, on Delwood and Maple, we're selling for 115,000 for a Maple Street in Berkshire North. So we got to raise our prices of our dirt out there in that one if we're going up against Berkshire. Yours is 10 times what that one neighborhood, looks like.
Well, I think you've got to understand what you got flat lots and walkout lots and all those things, Mike. And, people just aren't going to pay $140,000 for a flat lot, even if it is 80 feet wide. We've tested the market. Trust me, it is a business for us. And we try to get as much as we can for our lots within reason. We want to make the development successful, so we try to keep it to a price point that works. But I don't think you're going to see the 26 lots up against Warrior go for $140,000 a lot. I think you're going to be down in that 105 to 110 range for those. And I think you're going to be on the internals that are walkouts that are just probably going to be 135, 140. And then I think you're going to try to make your money on the edges. And that's just how it works. I mean, we've done the math and we know where our costs are. We do this every day. And it's just, we can't get to our minimum margins. And then you look at the risks of the market. So we're just asking for a little bit of credit with the work that we've done. We think we've done an exemplary job, and we'd like to finish the work that we started. And that's all we're asking for.
Thanks, Dave.
Susan or Shrikant, do you have questions or comments?
I was just going to say, I echo a lot of the comments that Mike and Ted have made. I'm not in the real estate business, so I'm going to defer to Ted's expertise and your expertise there, Dave. But I'm looking at the numbers here. You mentioned, if we're looking at the $377 per linear foot valuation, versus the $3,000 per lot, that's over a $600,000 difference in what we're talking about. And then even at the 268, we're talking about, $400,000 difference. So, I'm hesitant to say that, yeah, let's just, push this down the road for another day when we're talking about those sums of money and that sort of, the requirements there, right? As far as building that useful area. But I am curious, and I think Ted already asked this, but I just want to confirm, what is the limitation here that makes it unjustifiable or unworthy of the market to make that additional difference part of the purchase of the land for the end user? I mean,
it's just that you can't get that much money for the lots if you keep adding it on. If you take the $14,000 in additional costs that we've experienced per lot in Clive versus our next most expensive, and you add another $13,000, you're looking at $27,000 difference. And then we have to put our margins on top of it. It just becomes a feasibility issue, and then we have to consider the risk of doing it. And when you're facing a marketplace that I firmly believe, and most experts agree, is we're going to go through some rough times, and our own experience tells us we will, because we're going to be holding some lots, because we're going to take back a number of lots of builders that aren't performing right now because they can't afford to build more right now for a number of reasons. The one piece of the market that's held up very well is the custom market, which this is directed toward, but everybody still has their limits on what you can pass on. I mean, it's just not possible to say, well, let's just charge the end user for it. I don't think you can feasibly do that in this circumstance.
No, and I appreciate those comments. And, I think Mike had said this earlier, we understand that this has to be, has to work on both sides, right? Like, you've got to be able to run your business, and we're looking at this from, how does this affect the city, right? How does this affect what we're trying to achieve, right? But I'm still hung up on the idea of, especially when you're talking about, these custom high-end homes, where you're talking about an $8,000 difference being, kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Like, that's the amount that is going to make this unmarketable, right? Or uncompetitive, especially when we're talking about some of the other amenities that this development benefit from, specifically the trails that we were just talking about, some of the things that are unique to Clive, if I don't mind tooting our own horn a little bit, right? As far as our soil quality, our water management, all of that, so I think there's an aspect of that to consider here as well.
I appreciate that very much, and I think we are. And I mean, we have the math in our to know where we are, and we're business people that look at the risk. And like I said, we're just asking for some consideration to help us on this, to help mitigate that risk. And we think that we've over-delivered in a significant fashion in our first 10 plats that we've constructed, and this is our 11th and final single-family plat. And it's just it's a risk. It's a risk that is going to get real hard to stomach.
I appreciate the comments, and yeah, I'm just, I am open to the idea of, looking at putting some of this cost on the actual builder, right? I think Amanda had mentioned that, and if I remember correctly, Ted had said something that he was supportive about that as well. But yeah, I appreciate your comments. There's a little bit of inner turmoil on my end as far as, is this the actual breaking point, right? Is this the point that makes this untenable for those end users?
Well, I'm just telling you that it is from our perspective at this point, and and that's what I'm saying. And again, Ted's comments on surprises at the end, I wanted to address that as well. We hate that too. We don't like it when people don't know there's a trail back there. We put it in all our materials. We don't like it when somebody gets assessed, because like you guys and the city staff, we get all the calls as well. Same thing with a trail connection. If there's going to need to be a retaining wall, I've never seen that done in the developments we've done in all our history. And I certainly don't want to get the phone call that, hey, the city's coming and putting a retaining wall on my lot, because it is their lot. There's an easement, but that's something I would be very concerned about. So we don't like surprises either, because we get the calls. So
yeah, I'm with you 100% on that retaining wall issue. And I mean, for me, the line of demarcation where I just can't get past is that, and it's what drove this policy in the first place, is the idea that we're going to backload the costs to the homeowner, 10 years down the road. That's like a line we can't cross, right? And it sounds like you guys are with us on that. And so I appreciate that. Yeah. So if there's another creative solution that we can come to where, you know, we protect the city, we give you some relief, and then maybe we pass on a little bit of that to the builder, then, you know, let's go down that path. You know, I'm completely open to that. But yeah, it's the backloading, which was always the biggest concern for me. So
100% agree with that.
You know, and I'd echo that. Dave, I listen to what you're saying. Obviously, you guys run a business and you've done a great job with your developments. There's no question about that. They're high value developments and Clive appreciates them. I know we have some stringent measures here. You folks have worked with it in the past, but can we be creative with this? You know, can we be creative with the builder? And Ted, I think you said it well. I've listened to the arguments pro and con here, and I would challenge staff a little bit. How can we find a solution here that involves some of these different aspects we've talked about that makes it manageable for Vista, that involves the builder and you know, keeps the risk away from a future assessment right there. We've got some really sharp people. And how do we find a creative solution that's not, you know, a black and white solution right here, but that thinks out of the box? That's what I'd like to see.
Susan, do you have anything?
I like the conversation about the creative solution, but I'm also aware that builders are feeling the pinch of risk as well. So I think we need, yeah, I think we need to have eyes wide open about all of it.
Thank you, Susan. It sounds like, Matt, did you?
Just a couple of things, Your Honor. Brian, you made a comment at the beginning where you talked about avoid higher density. Why? I'm curious.
What was that? Avoid higher density?
Yeah, that was something that you said in terms of things that you wanted to avoid, and higher density was one of them. And so I was just curious because when you are dealing with more substantial costs, and you're talking about value per acre, you know, higher density is a methodology to spread those costs. I was just curious on your comment when you said avoid higher density, just what you meant by that.
I think I was speaking more of a higher density product above single family, something multifamily, something like that. I think we've looked at this layout with single family units, and because of the boundaries of the property, the topography, everything, we're about maxed out at density as far as single family units go. And avoiding putting a different product in there is important because this is kind of the vision we've had for this piece since the very beginning. So we'd really like to move forward with the project we're presenting to you today.
But Brian, that argument doesn't stand with me when it comes to you void multifamily, right? I get it. Your density issue and all that. You're not getting multifamily. This is an R1 and you're asking for PUD. We're not going to give you a PUD if you're going to come in and say higher density or, you know, multifamily higher density. Higher density to us would be multiple homes, more smaller homes and more homes inside that area. So the argument of avoid higher density, meaning what you just said, clicks with me because nobody ever put that on the table, nor will it ever be on the table as far as I'm concerned. Of you coming in,
that's one of those.
We want a PUD and we want to put hotels on it. Come on.
No.
Yeah,
let me address that a little bit. I don't know if that was Matt's original comment, but if we were going to increase the density on this piece from a single family perspective, we couldn't take the lot size from all 80s down. If we take the internal lots and the lots up on Warrior down to 70 footers, we could add a maximum of 11 to 12 lots.
Sure.
The problem with that is it'll devalue the rim of all the really good lots, and we'll be working against ourselves to make that work. So if we're going to do a single family project on this piece, it has to be it has to be done where we can get the value around the rim. And so it is a PUD, I believe, and it is unzoned. The master plan has always been to do it as an executive style development, but I don't believe we're that pigeonholed. I know you guys control the key to that, but doing a higher density single family because of the topography of the ground is is going to be a negative. It's going to make it even further infeasible. In fact, we'd probably lose money. So that's how thin it would be. This is.
I agree with you,
So
Dave. I
agree with what you're saying.
Yeah,
Mike.
yeah, right. We both agree on that. It's just a bluff that isn't.
Oh, I was just sort of laying out the spectrum of what could ultimately lead to us not doing the project.
Part of the reason I asked that is you all have done executive townhome development, for example. That was a lot denser than a standard single family home. And it's, that was a scenario that yielded, I know it's not necessarily the 10-year vision, but of course, there's a lot of things that have changed, costs and things have changed, and sometimes visions have to change. And so that was just more what I was getting at, was that ever a consideration? Because you have done in the Shadow Creek area, high-end executive townhomes that are denser development. Would that get you closer to the yields? Again, this is just me trying to brainstorm a little bit.
It might, Matt. It might. If we could come in and do it, our only issue with that is we like to disclose everything to our end users is that we know. And so when we put our plans out there, it gives me some trepidation to think about making those changes, because I think everybody who's bought around this adjacent to it thinks these are single family larger lot homes. So, we're not asking to break the city's budget. We're just asking to get some help so that we can have the guts to move forward on this thing with the marketplace the way it is, and maybe be given a little bit of credit for the work we have done and the increased value that we've been able to exceed on the expectations. But if I think one of the solutions would be to just sell the ground from our perspective to a senior living facility on part of it, and maybe townhomes. But again, I don't like the idea because it's different than the expectations maybe around the place. And we all don't want to deal with residents that way, that have a legitimate complaint at that point, even though I think legally we could do it with the support of the council, if that's the direction that the council would like us to head and look at.
Let me summarize where I think we are, at least what I'm hearing. I think I'm hearing from the majority of the council that we'd like to look at some kind of creative solution to see if we can look at what staff has suggested and otherwise, which leads me to wonder if we need to table this yet again. Amanda, step forward.
Thank you. So staff's recommendation at this point wouldn't be to table, since this is only the second consideration. We do have another one coming down the road. So our recommendation would be, if you are favorable to looking at, well, even if you're not, honestly, favorable to looking at the creative ways to get here, that you would go ahead and pass on this consideration to the third. That would give staff and the developer the opportunity to come back together, put our heads together, see what creative options we can get to. They can determine where their bottom line is, exactly what they need. And the benefit of this is, if they decide the project doesn't work for them and they don't want to move forward, they can then withdraw, and we are not stuck in that 12-month waiting period to be able to consider another similar single-family rezoning because this got a no vote. So our recommendation would be to continue on to the third consideration. If we get to that at the July 14th meeting, and we're still working through details, not there yet, we could then continue that third consideration if we needed to. But I would like to get clarity from the council before you do any action tonight, is if one of those creative things you're willing to consider is that increased taxable value, or if you do not want that to play into staff's consideration as we work towards the third consideration in a few weeks.
I think all options should be on the table.
Agreed.
I agree. I'm a little hesitant on it. Dave, you do great work, and I've never said anything other than that. There is a little bit of the wave we're all riding too, with the taxable increases in income, right? That just happened by chance over the last couple of years of just the housing market has gone crazy. And so some of this has gone there on its own, on top of the work you do and your team does.
No doubt.
And so, you've written some pretty dang good times. And if this was in front of us a year ago, you couldn't use the argument of we're looking at, bleak days. So I'm saying on that assessment deal, just to say that your other areas hit the 1.2, 1.5 without diving in deeper is how much of that happened just because of the wave of the economy and what happened in the housing market versus, the chance of the buildings.
So I hear
There's
what
some
you're,
of that.
I hear what you're saying, but the reality is if Dave's got a lot that he's selling for $110,000, they're not building a house for less than 500,000 on that lot. It's just not going to happen. And so your assessed value is at a minimum going to be at that. And again, Dave's saying they're going to do significantly more than that in all likelihood. So I don't think it's that much of a risk is my point.
Okay.
At lot prices at that price.
And I think what plays into, Amanda, if I can speak to this too, is the creativity between the developer cost, the builder fee, however we want to call it, and the taxable valuation. But I still think it's important for us to have some kind of guidance. I don't know, Amanda, how you feel about this in terms of where we ultimately want to get in terms of that cost number related to Warrior Lane. We're with what the developer is offering, it's less than 50% of what the number was last year for Warrior Lane per linear foot. Of course, there's the builder piece and then the assessment piece. I mean, we'll try to put the math together, but I get the sense from the council that there is still, the reality is as both Vista knows and all of us know, that whatever costs aren't covered here are going to be covered by the entire city's tax base 10, 15 years down the road, and all of the city of Clive's taxpayers to build that road. And so our goal would be, at least from a staff perspective, is again, understanding the balancing act here is still try to come close to some target numbers. Again, I don't need a specific number from the council. In fact, I'd prefer you not do that. But I think it's going to be on us as staff to make sure that we're trying to come back with that justifiable formula for you all, because, you're all the ones that have to defend it at the end of the line. So that would be kind of, I want to add on to what Amanda was getting to too, in terms of the direction for staff. Am I shaping that correctly?
Yes.
Well, what I'm hearing, I think, is that everything should be on the table, whatever you can craft.
And I think also to circle back then to the trail piece is, can we get further clarity on that North Trail connection for that next reading? We got an extra week in here. It's 3 weeks before your next council meeting. And so that's probably the other follow-up item is that North Trail connection. Would that be accurate?
Shrikant?
Just real quick, I just want to add before we move back to the trail, I'm open to reviewing any, solutions, but I would prefer to see it, not include that valuation piece, that additional cost there. But, I agree with the other council members that are saying, we should look at everything.
All right, then looping back to the fourth trail connection, which what we've heard is that Amanda said it can be done. It's just a question of costs and what might be needed, retaining walls and so forth, and who would pay for all that. And much of that, I think, from what Amanda was saying, particularly retaining walls and such, might be a burden on the city.
Potentially, could be.
Potentially.
I don't think that it's realistic to get to a definitive answer on that for the rezoning, just with the way the entitlement process works. That would be asking them to spend quite a bit more money potentially to get to that fine detail without knowing if we're even going to approve the rezoning. So I, again, at this point would recommend that we preserve that easement location being shown. We continue to have that on the preliminary plat. It can always go away at the final plat through the construction drawing review and determining exactly what would be required there. That would be the course of action that staff would recommend on the trail connection.
That makes sense.
Everybody good with that? Then what we're looking at is the second consideration.
Move that ordinance number 1121, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the second reading of 1121. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? And the second reading of ordinance number 1121, we didn't get Srikant.
Yeah, mine appears not to be working again, but I will vote in favor.
Okay, so we have an affirmative vote from Srikant plus, all five. Very good. Good job, Matt. All right. So that passes by a vote of 5-0. Staff and developer have plenty of work ahead in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
you're
your
feeling better.
Get
consideration.
better.
Thank you very much.
All right, Richard, we appreciate you being Johnny on the spot and ready to move right into the next thing.
All right, I'll get the presentation going here. Is there anything I need to do here? We'll have Pete help me up. Well, I appreciate the opportunity tonight to give the council an overview of the upcoming Clive Festival. So this will be the second full festival since I've been here. And so we've got a few new things here that we learned from last year. They're kind of our first full time doing it and looking forward to showing you. Perfect. All right, so just under a month here, we've got Clive Festival coming up on Friday and Saturday, July 15th and 16th. First couple slides, just a quick overview of the schedule of events we have planned for this year. This is where we're at as of today. We anticipate we'll probably have a few other additional activities and potentially some events that'll pop in here. But we started off on Friday with the Aquatic Center being open at 11:30. Then things really start to kick off about 5 o'clock where we have the bounce houses, the art awards for the Kids for Art, corporate bags, and again, the beer garden. And then finally music starts at 5:30 with Sway Band and then 8:30 with Birdchild Band. And then we wrap it up for that first day with our kind of teaser fireworks show.
Richard, is that open swim? Is that free? Is that within by open swim? What do you mean by that?
So it just what we do is we just advertise as part of the Clive Festival as the Aquatic Center is open. I think on Saturday we do the 50% off admission to allow people in there.
Discount, how you want to do it?
No, not on Friday, but on Saturday we will. Then we move into Saturday. We've got events from 6:30 in the morning all the way through the fireworks at 10 p.m. The morning is focused on a lot of kids and family activities. There's the Clive Running Festival, Touch a Truck, and kids activities here at the fireworks. Then as well as the pancake breakfast from 7-Eleven. Then starting at 1 o'clock, the fire department has their very popular slip and slide that has the helicopter landing. We have bingo back here at the special events building, but I do want to point out one kind of special thing here. We're having the birthday party for Dutch in the afternoon. So I believe he'll be there as well as he'll have some demonstrations. So we're really looking forward to that and having him there. And I don't think he's 3, so that might be a typo on our part. Oh, he is. Very good.
Is that demo about like taking Weaver down? Like at a direct? No suit.
Well, the mayor said you guys are all drawing straws for who gets to be part of the demo process.
Deceptively fast.
Weaver doesn't need a suit.
I think that's.
Yeah, I'm probably.
So we're excited about that, and I think that'll be a very popular draw. And then in the evening, we've got the bounce houses again, food trucks, drinks, and we have the Savage Fred's band at 5. And then 8 o'clock, we have the faculty lounge. And then finally, we wrap it up with the fireworks. Just a note on the bands that we selected for this year. These really came out of a survey we did after last year's Clive Festival. I believe we got 700 responses and asking people what they'd like to see for bands. And these were the 4 most popular bands that we got responses on. So we're excited to see them and get them out here and going on this.
Richard, any plans to incorporate the goats into?
Yes, the goats will be there like always. They'll be in the same enclosure they had last year, just along the north edge of where the bags tournament is. So we actually left all the fence up there. So come Friday afternoon, we'll move them over there along with a hut or two. And then one of the improvements that we've done this year, and you've probably seen that at some of our food truck Friday events, is we got coin operated machines for the food. So we don't have to, a little bit more environmentally conscious and less on the staff effort. We just fill it up and people put the quarters in and they can feed them all day and night long. And they will be very fat and happy by the end of the weekend. Other improvements we're looking at for 2022, we're very, very excited about this first one. We've been working with Elizabeth and her team and the new bank. that the city has to do a new point of sale system for taking credit card charges. In the past, we've been able to slowly do it using the laptops and some express bill pay, but we're now stepping in the 21st century. We'll have these handhelds by Clover that will allow you to use Apple Pay, credit cards. It'll move very quickly and allows us to really engage with people in a much more efficient manner as they want to get their drink tickets or they want to buy some of their merchandise. So we're very, very excited about that and really appreciate the work that Elizabeth's team has done to help us get through that. They're great because they work on Wi-Fi or cell data, so we don't have to worry about how we're going to get internet connection out there. We actually have been able to test run them out at Food Truck Friday the last 2 Fridays, and with being at Linham Park this Friday, we'll be able to take those mobile units out there and it'll just without skipping a beat. So we're very, very excited about this. And I think people will see a big difference in kind of some of the customer service related to that. Secondly, we are working with the Bike Collective. They are going to come out and do their bike valet. So we saw a lot of people on bikes last year. They were chained to trees, they were pushed up against chairs, buildings, things like that. So we saw a need for kind of a process improvement there. And so the Bike Collective will be out there all weekend on Friday and Saturday nights. You walk your bike up to them when you get off the trail, they'll just be right on the end of the bridge. They will give you a ticket just like you would for a car valet. And then when you come back, they'll give you your bike and away you go. It's free, but they will take tips. But we're very, very excited about this and think it'll be a big bonus for out there.
I thought when you said bike valet, you were doing like a rickshaw or something.
Now we are talking about something like that. We are looking at possibly, because people have to park quite a ways away for different parts of the event. We are looking at the possibility of maybe doing some sort of like golf cart shuttle that people maybe could pick them up at their cars and drop them back off at their car after the event. So we're looking at the possibility of that. We don't have anything finalized at this point, but we do think it's certainly possible. Like
that was an option that was used in the past. It tends to be volunteer intensive,
Mhm.
as you're probably aware.
Yeah.
And there can be somewhat of a liability with that. Any thoughts of an ATM there on site?
Yep, we'll have 2 ATMs there on Friday and Saturday. So basically what they do, they will drop them off and then we just move them around to the point where we want them on a dolly. And then each night we'll dolly them back into the storage room. And yeah, so very much something that was needed from last year because of things like the bounce houses only take cash. Dutch's birthday party again and demo. We're also going to be doing a mural. I'm not sure the exact location, but basically people have the opportunity to participate in creating a mural as part of the Clive Festival. So anyone can participate in that and we'll have a cool creation at the end.
Did I see the bags tournament for not business?
Yes, I believe,
Saturday.
yeah.
You're already cut out of it though, so.
We pre-registered the both of you just so we don't have to do it last minute.
Now, just to make sure, you're allowed to bring your own bags, right? Custom bags.
Absolutely.
Right.
Got
I've taken my game to a whole nother level.
Me
so.
too. Mine are like this big.
I'm just letting you know.
But we do have a certification process for both of you to make sure you're using legal bags. So financial impacts, I want to point out and thank Christy at the Chamber. She's done a lot of work to go out and kind of hit the ground running to find sponsorships for us for this year. Very excited that we're ahead of where we were at last year. Again, Smart Honda and Polk County come in as kind of our lead sponsors. Next Generation Realty is a new one that came forward to us. They were very excited and actually sought us out. Community Choice and Lincoln Savings are in, Willis Auto. And you can see all the way down there. And we're still searching. So if you know anyone to be interested in being a sponsor, we'd love to have them. And we can reach out to them at any time. Expenditures. So just kind of rundown of what the expenditures are so far here. Most of these are pretty standard from the past year. The fireworks was around year 2 of a 2-year contract. Our music, the sound, the bands, tent and stage. And then one of the things, the agreement with the chamber is that they get a certain percentage of the revenue as part of helping us find sponsorships for that. Just a general layout, it'll be pretty much the same as it has been in past years. The one difference is adding the bike valet area there just on the east side of on the south edge of the bridge. But otherwise, it'll be familiar to all the past layout that we've had done in the past. One other thing we did add here, so we have the light trailer that we have used for the bags area, but we heard a lot of people say it was kind of dark when the last band left, kind of at the southwest corner by the edge of the parking lot. So we're adding a second light trailer there as well, just to add some light there. So when people are kind of exiting out after the second band. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or otherwise we'll look forward to seeing you then. So our budget this year is about $40,000 that we're planning for. A lot of that will just depend on how much alcohol people drink, but that usually cancels itself out with the revenue.
Cost is 40, you raised what, 24, 25, so.
Yeah, and based on last year, we did about $30,000 in alcohol sales and drink sales.
So
What,
could be a $15,000 in the black then. So
at this point, that's kind of the estimate, but you know, it just depends. If we get really bad weather, who knows?
Other questions for Richard?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Richard,
yeah,
So the-
great lineup.
you want to share any information about storytelling around the Greenbelt landing?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing, obviously this will be coming forward to you, the council, when we get to the point of having a site plan for approval for Greenbelt Landing. But one of the things that we want to do at Clive Festival is actually kick off the kind of the public phase of fundraising for the Greenbelt Landing project. We feel like we're getting to that point where we're getting enough of the grants and behind the scenes larger donations that now it's time to open it up to the public and invite them to start joining us with some of those smaller donations. So the goal is to that night unveil a short video about the project, as well as start to ask people for different donations. We're going to be putting about a half a dozen 4x8 banners up at different locations on the site to show what that's going to look like once it's completed, as a way to also kind of kick that process off. So we're excited about that and really excited to tell the public about this project and ask for their help.
Very good. Any other questions for Richard?
Thank you.
Susan doesn't know it, Mayor, but she's my secret weapon this year in bags.
Oh, that'll do it. Good plan.
I used to play with Weaver, a good friend of mine, and he refuses to play because I am no good.
Because you suck.
And Lisa has now said she won't play with me either. So it's Susan and I.
All right, well. As long as we don't pull Connie into the picture, we're probably safe there.
Won't happen.
Well, let's go to reports at this point. Pete, we'll start on your end.
Thank you, Your Honors. MetroNet update, met with their representatives this morning. In May and April, they were a little lighter with their work in Clive. As a result, they didn't have a whole lot of interactions that created problems with residents. They were still on the hook to get some things improved and fixed that weren't quite right, either whether from restoration or some places where they did some work outside of the public utility easement area. But from what I heard this morning, they've now made those corrections and are going to be getting going again in Clive, two areas in particular. The big one is going to be coming into the easternmost neighborhood in Clive. That's probably the next location. And then they've got some follow-up sort of nodes that they need to finish up in the country club area. At this time, they're sort of holding back on getting into some of the big lots that are in the Woodlands and Country Club north of the creek. They're trying to figure out if they've got enough density there to make it worthwhile to lay their fiber all the way into those spaces. That's how they represented it to us today, which was interesting to hear. They are still on track to be finished up, primarily with the exception of maybe onesie twosies here in the fall. But they're very active throughout the entire metro. And I would not be surprised to see some of that throttling up and throttling down in their Clive work just because of all their opportunities they have to do things in neighboring communities. Any questions about MetroNet?
I had a quick question. Based on what you were just saying about they're looking at the feasibility of if there's enough density, does that mean that we might have a portion of Clive that doesn't have fiber to the home service?
I don't want to speak for MetroNet on that. We have throughout the city now a lot of coverage of high-speed providers. If it's not MetroNet, it's CenturyLink or Lumen and Mediacom. What I've sort of heard today was that MetroNet, due to changing market conditions, still continues to evaluate where they go first and how they make those business decisions. But the commitment or the plan that they had was that they were going to be covering almost all of the Clive neighborhoods, except for those that maybe were in the westernmost part of the city that is now being covered by another all fiber provider. Yeah. So we'll continue to get updates from them. Credit to Public Works. They still are holding them to account for all of their work and making sure they get the work done right.
Thanks, Pete.
Of course. Finally, fireworks. Tough day for the fire, for our friends in public safety. When we get toward the 4th and people start shooting off fireworks, the rule in Clive, if it flies or explodes, can't do it. That's not the rule in all of our neighboring communities, but we'll be putting that information out there very clearly with the understanding also that enforcement of this is extremely, extremely difficult. Hands have been tied by other levels of government on this, but we will still ask all of our Clive neighbors to be good neighbors and follow the rules that this council has set.
Enforcement inside the city, our hands are tied.
No, but the sale of fireworks,
yeah,
then in
yeah.
neighboring communities,
Sure.
what they're able to do, there's nothing we can
Right.
do to go and make that decision for them.
Yeah, Your Honor, too, I wanted to have Lieutenant Rayberg speak a little bit to the enforcement and then have our fire marshal speak a little bit to what they're doing to ensure the sale locations are as safe, at least as we can make them under state law. Lieutenant?
Yes, Mayor and Council. So we're taking a similar approach that we have in recent years. Historically, we've seen the calls go down, oddly enough, for fireworks use. When they come in, we're going to address them. Generally, we get a lot of good compliance from our residents. Catch somebody using them, we ask them not to do it again, and then we, like I say, we get a lot of compliance. I think one citation has been issued in the last 4 years for somebody shooting off fireworks. Like I say, the complaints have gone down and we have a lot of really tolerant residents that know it's temporary. They put up with it for the night and then it goes away. So, but yeah, we're taking a similar approach to that.
And then Clay, would you talk a little bit about, so one thing that I know that the fire department's been real focused on is even though we have limitations on the land use side of it in terms of how Clay and the chief are handling the sale locations. We have 2 sale locations. One where the incident was last year is not going to be a sale location. They're moving to the Pier 1 parking lot, or the former Pier 1 parking lot. The one out on 156th and Hickman is the same one. But Clay, you want to talk a little bit about what you do with those companies that sell there in terms of your requirements, in terms of safety?
So they have to go through a city permit process. They get issued a permit. That permit is contingent and active upon myself doing an inspection. The state has 2 ways of looking at it. The state will send an inspector out, or they will self-inspect themselves, or the city can take over the inspection portion of it. We decided to take over this inspection portion. That way we control a little bit better. After our fireworks incident last year, we implemented a couple extra safety measures. One is signage, require them to identify the storage container and the selling container much more than what was required last year, and also implemented a dumpster. Surprisingly enough, the majority of a firework is made up of cardboard, and they didn't have a good spot to get rid of that stuff. So they were just piling it up. So now they get it away. They actually, both locations got shut down. I shut them both down last Friday. They were selling fireworks without their permit being signed. So I went back and conducted the inspection on Monday, and they passed. They got it signed, so they are actively selling. Those measures that we've taken, we're going to proactively stop in many, many more times before the end of the season. Any questions?
Do you happen to have a map that shows the radius of a 3rd mile?
I have it in here. I don't know.
can use the
if you
document.
were given- Oh, I got you. Yes, yes, yes.
Just look up.
The one that's got the radius, the 2 radiuses, a 1/3 of a mile.
There you go.
Okay. So here's the old Pier 1 location. And the 1/3 of a mile radius is based off of our emergency response guide. That's where we came up with that. So in the event our stance, we put a pretty significant training together after our incident last year. So our game plan is, in the event we have an incident at this location, is to not put the fire out evacuate the third of a mile, and let it burn. We deemed our incident last year a close call with, again, this being an explosive. We thought that we could have very well hurt somebody by the way that we approached this fire. So we put together a pretty good PowerPoint. We invited all of our neighboring agencies to kind of come and listen to that. Because we had an incident, the state kind of looks at how we handled it and how we're moving forward with it. So this is the Pier 1 location. And here is the old overhead door location and the 3rd mile radius. So
Do
A lot of
you,
houses in those radiuses.
a lot of houses, a lot of houses.
My house is in that radius.
Fine, that's you.
we'll flag that one special. So yes.
So we have a sophisticated enough system that should that occur, you push a button and you automatically get all these.
No,
You've got to program them all in.
no, our system would be contacting as many people as we can on our behalf and manual evacuating.
We don't have that.
Was that door to door?
We do have,
It is.
we have Code Red.
Yeah.
Code Red's changing to something new, but for now it's still going to be in place at this time. I believe that's correct. Matt?
Anybody that's even in this year, though, anybody signed up for Code Red,
Right.
we can, but our Code Red, specifically our zones are based on flooding. So we don't have like a zone for a fireworks sales location. We could do a broad Code Red to the whole community, but it would go across the entire city.
Right.
And even,
We
that-
have preset ones for flood zones.
and even Code Red is dependent on this technology that was originally built with landlines in mind.
Yeah.
Now we have so few of those that if you're catching cell phones, it has to be people who have opted in. So the
yeah.
reach is significantly limited.
So in the future, not for this year, but in our permitting, are we up against the wall of what we can charge for a permit? And I ask that because zero. Wow. And an inspection is zero? Can we charge for an inspection?
We do not charge for an inspection.
Can we?
I don't know that. I
Well, why
don't.
I ask is there's texting we've talked about, right? Texting options that we can control here and you can set it up so that there are zones. So we figure out who's in here, let them opt in with a letter. And we make that, you're gonna blow up zone, right? And push the you're gonna blow up button.
That's the process improvement for next year.
Yeah.
Matt, don't we have the capability with our digital sirens to actually broadcast some type of message on that?
They're not programmed that way at the moment. And that would be I'd be concerned with that in the sense of it'd be a little bit of a blunt instrument for this type of use. And we already have some challenges with sirens going off for high wind events. I wouldn't want to create more confusion with what those sirens are.
I'm
used
just
for.
trying to explore.
But I get it. But it is. And like, for example, the incident we had last year was in the middle of the night.
Correct.
It was, I can't
Yeah,
remember.
there's gotta be a better way than door to door.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
To the
too.
point where we shut down Hickman Road for a couple hours. I don't remember.
And we did analyze that area last year. There's a pretty significant grade change from where the incident happened to where all the residents were. So we felt comfortable not evacuating the houses at 2 a.m.
Not so much here, though.
Not so much here.
It's bringing back all kinds of bad memories. That's the
Correct.
last time I was acting city manager as well when we.
Yeah, I was gone.
We are doing this again,
I'm
right?
seeing a
I'm
pattern
gonna be
right
gone
there.
for- I'm gonna be coming back not till the night of the 4th this year.
Great.
Amazing how that happens.
To Councilman McCoy's point, texting services, some of the tools that we've been investigating do give us a lot of flexibility to pick a specific area that we can draw on a map. Just within the tool, round up or lasso the numbers that we have for folks who self-identified as a cell phone at that residence, and then blast out specifically to them, which
So-
doesn't require the lifting that Matt would have to do with like warning sirens or other types of tools.
We have other options.
So do we anticipate doing that so we're ready to go just in case?
That's a
No.
strategic planning discussion we need to have because we do not have those tools in place now.
Oh, we don't have,
No, we do not.
They're inexpensive, but we can't get them put together this year, but they're inexpensive. But I also think we need to charge these permits. So whatever you want to call them, inspection fee.
State regulated.
Permits, but not inspection fees.
That's something we can.
Yeah, we gotta look at-
Look
yeah,
at
we
that,
gotta
we
look
look
at
at
it.
our,
Good
our
research.
fees. I agree with you, Mike. We're incurring costs with this. We should be able to pass some of those off.
So with the fire department agreeing to do the inspections, we are allowed to put in for a state level grant. So a lot of the taxes that come from this go to the state into a fireworks grant, and then we're able to apply for that. Last year it funded
Just approve the grant on your consent.
yep,
agenda.
an $11,000 trainer. And this year we're putting in for roughly $10,000 worth of radio battery replacements.
That
So
could be a texting system.
So I guess my
That's an
follow-up,
option. That's a grant opportunity.
It's a really good grant opportunity.
I like that.
my follow-up for you, Pete, these, can we put these up on the webpage or something to push it out so that if anyone's looking at information about fireworks, they realize where they are?
Absolutely. You're in the
I'll work with you,
blast zone.
chief, on getting that set up.
That's the line. You're in the blast zone.
Any other questions for Clay? And so in case of problem, resident just calls 911, gives the location.
So, yeah, we would ask that everybody call the non-emergency number rather than 911. The problem with enforcement is the police officer typically doesn't see the violation. So it's getting somebody to be a witness. That's why there's not a whole lot of citations issued generally. But we, like I say, compliance is generally not a problem for us. So.
I'll be a witness against McCoy when he does it. So
Okay, I've got you written down already from last year, I think.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
What? From those boys, yes. And jumping off the bridge. It's always the Weaver boys.
that's definitely my
Do
boy.
you have anything else?
No,
for
I'm
us?
gonna stop talking while I'm ahead here. Mayor. I don't know where this is going now.
Shrikant, what do you have for us?
Not much to report. I'll keep it short. We have another business that opened up here in Clive, fitness location, Hot Works, and Clive Chamber did a great job. And yeah, I think that's it for tonight.
All right, thank you. Ted?
So last Friday, I attended the Polk County Housing Trust bus tour along with Miss Susan and Miss Amanda, and our old friend Alex was there as well. Did a really nice tour. Started up in Johnston, went to, through Des Moines, Valley Junction, and West Des Moines. Saw some really good, nice projects. These are, some housing for affordable housing opportunities that you've seen the buildings get erected. They look very nice, but I know for me personally, I didn't know the story behind them, right? And it was really interesting to hear about those. A lot of creative financing that are available. So I know Amanda knows a lot more about that than I do, but they mentioned a number of the opportunities there. And they've got some really nice projects, right down in Valley Junction, one right off 73rd Street, stuff that would look really nice on 86th Street, to be honest. So some real opportunities, and I'm sure Susan has some thoughts on that as well, but really enjoyed it and thought it was a worthwhile endeavor and something that, we need to look at down the line for sure. So
Thanks, Ted. Anything else?
that's it.
Eric?
No, just to add, I joined Shrikant at the ribbon cutting grand opening at Hot Works. So it's always nice when we open up a new business in Clive.
Absolutely. Wanted to call to your attention the Cityscape for June. Page 18 has a nice tribute to Bob Jostin. Want to make sure everyone noticed that. So,
Nice.
and if you'll bear with me for some federal acronyms here. I met yesterday with a rep from the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. That was Andy Berkey. And you may be familiar with BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is providing $42 billion to expand high-speed internet access. And probably the takeaway for Clive is that we can be in on the equity portion of that. That's $2.75 billion to get a high-speed internet to those that can't afford it. And there'll be more details forthcoming, but I just want to give you a heads up that we'll probably have to be involved in gathering the addresses of those that are in that category. The FCC will have maps out in the fall, and the state will be responsible. So we have to work with the state on, working through that process. But it looks like a real opportunity. The state will get a minimum of 100 million, might be closer to $1 billion, just depending on how their share shakes out based on those that don't have internet and those that can't afford it. So just want to give you an update that we'll look forward to that coming down the pike. Susan.
I would just add on the Polk County Housing Trust Fund bus tour that Matt Hauge apologized that they didn't include Clive this year and would like to, maybe next year. So we'll look forward to that.
He mentioned specifically, Susan, on the Sterling Inn conversion and including that as part of the tour next year. So
I think that will be good. And it occurred to me that it makes me even more excited to have our Economic Vitality Committee preparing to kick off, because we saw some great examples, and we will look forward to working with some of the citizens of Clive to look at including some of those ideas as we discuss economic vitality for the city. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, having attended the Iowa Association of Business and Industry Council or conference in Dubuque last week. And the last keynote speaker was Clay Holderman, who is the CEO of the overarching Unity Point. He gave a very poignant discussion about the stress that healthcare workers have been under. And it was just a reminder to me, given our strong connection with Mercy One and Clive, that we need to keep that in mind, and maybe there would be some ways that we can think to recognize how much we appreciate the healthcare workers that serve the community.
Good point. Anything else, Susan? Thank you. Michael.
Several items. One, met with or had the monthly with WRA. Everything's going well. Grimes is about to officially come on board as they get their trunk brought down south through Urbandale. They finally, they worked through that challenge. And so they're coming on. That's good for everybody. That's a lowering of some fees to some, but really a good move by Grimes. The other part of that is somehow I got stuck on a committee through WRA. I am the vice chair, but added to an email chain that I answered to. And so EJ Giovanetti and Jody Smith said, you're on this committee. And so with them, it's EJ Giovanetti, Jody Smith, myself, along with Mayor County and Linda Westergaard from the Des Moines side, about two major issues. That's the operating agreement is about to expire. The operating agreement is with Des Moines as literally the operators. And there is a lot of talk about changing that up, that it will continue to be Des Moines, but phased out over several years is one push. Des Moines' push obviously is nothing will happen. But you have some other Des Moines, members that are open to it. They have several members on WRA. I think they have 9 votes actually. But Joe Gatto's on there too with Linda and Mayor County. So the operating agreement, that's going to be a big deal because several months ago in the meeting, in this committee meeting, there was a mention on, it was very confusing on who actually ran the WRA. Jonathan Gano mentioned that it was very clear that Scott did. And so folks said, yes, that's how we see it too, Scott Hutchinson's, and they said, no, Scott, our city manager, runs WRA. So there was a little bit of rub there on how that came out. So that is going to be cleared up, says this committee. The other part is the governance is also coming up. and it will be opened back up as well. And that is like the DART governance got opened and changed to mirror mostly MWA's governance. That WRA mini all, but the city of Des Moines says that that should be opened up and changed as well with the inclusion of the rest of the cities and the growth of the rest of the cities. So that's coming up. That's an interesting one. Being stuck in between EJ and Jody is interesting times in those committees with those two. They've got a lot of knowledge and wisdom. So then the DART met. DART Executive Committee, which I sit on, met. Really focusing on funding issues as well as what's next for DART, route challenges, further decreasing routes, increasing fares, all those things that are happening, the loss of state money, Medicare, Medicaid money, that type of thing is huge for DART right now. And really ridership isn't seeing its increase. Well, we're seeing the increases in that last mile, which is important. With the Uber and taxi services that DART started as a pilot, but started it very inexpensive as a promo. And now the 6-month phase is done and they're going to raise the fees on all those, see what happens. They're a little nervous on that. So no more changes for Clive that I've seen coming. One good news out of that is I've heard from both DART and Wittern Group that they're very happy with their partnership. And so that's good news. And then the last piece I have to share is today I spent most of my day here in this room at a what's called What's in Your Watershed. Metro Waste Authority went for a $125,000 grant from the EPA and was awarded that to teach the classes that MWA teaches in the eastern side of the educational center is being taught for the 2nd year now here. And we will have a very special guest I hear tomorrow speaking to our group, our one and only Pete, about what it means to cities and watersheds and the importance of that. So that is a co-taught class by Sarah Borzo, who I think I've said to you, this group, and if not, I share it with everybody. She is our full-time teacher. We stole her from Waukee. She was a 6th grade science teacher. She won the National STEM Award for teachers, and we just got back from DC and the White House and all that. She's Metro's teacher. She's teaching this class as well as Keith Somerville from Drake University. It's been a long-time partnership between Drake University and Metro Waste Authority. So it's 15 teachers from really all over the state here today and tomorrow. And they're actively down. I mean, staff probably saw them everywhere but in your offices, and maybe tomorrow we'll get there. But they're everywhere. They're in the creek, literally, in the watershed, out in all the properties around here, walking down the bike trails with butterfly nets. And tomorrow will be the electricity in the creek and catching fish, stunning fish and all that, catching birds and doing counts. So all this data will then be brought in and given to Pete and Doug on what they see in our watershed and our ecological system and the health of it. So thank you to Clive for putting up with that. The house was full. So again, another reason why we keep these chambers so they can be moved around and the chairs can be moved around. This was the last place we could use. And so we fit those folks in here. And that should be a great partnership from here on out. That's it, Mayor.
Council?
No report. I'm just glad to be here, so.
We're glad you're here.
Just a few things, Your Honor. Just a reminder, tomorrow night, the Food Truck Friday event will be at Lannan Park. So for those of you kind of Clive After 5 memories potentially, but Food Truck Friday will be over at Lannan. You'll see some information I shared with you earlier today, just some concerns regarding drinking water challenges. The Des Moines Water Works, who supplies our drinking water, our treated drinking water, is having, particularly related to nitrates. And nitrification facility. And I know the news has covered that quite a bit. So we'll be sharing that information as well to encourage our residents and businesses just to be cognizant of that, especially related to the irrigation. Again, there's plenty of water in the rivers. It's just the fact of, can the denitrification facility keep up to pull the nitrates out? That is the choke point right now. And then also share with you some information on chemicals, forever chemicals and drinking water, and the EPA kind of sending a mixed message a little bit to water utilities on regulations and compliance. And so just some additional information on that. So a lot of subjects right now related to drinking water that is important to keep in mind as we talk about what Councilmember McCoy just alluded to in terms of your watershed and water quality. Very important for us here in Clive. Also, Country Club Boulevard and Hickman Road traffic signal is now coming back up again. So you'll see some information on that again, and kind of what I laid out for the city of Urbandale and Deerfield to work on, to come back to you all. I highly encourage you to take a read through that because that will be an item that will likely come up again at some point. Last time we discussed it was in 2020, and then it kind of quieted for a little bit, but the residents in that area will be have very loud voices when it comes to that potential for a traffic signal at that location. And then lastly, as alluded to earlier, I will be leaving the country starting tomorrow and back on the night of July 4th, just up in Canada. And Pete will be serving as acting city manager while I'm gone. And I do not hope for him to have anything related to fireworks sales locations. But anyway, I will leave it in his capable hands while I'm gone.
That was a hell of a lot tougher for Chief than it was for me. All I had to do was text you all in the middle of the night and next morning. So
that's all I have, Your Honor.
That's all you
Unless there's any
have.
questions.
Any correspondence, Matthew? And did I read that board review correctly, that was denied?
Oh, the reassessment.
Yeah. Read that correctly?
Yeah, it was. They didn't make any changes to it.
So that was good
I'll-
news.
I'll confirm that here, but
Anything else for the good of the order this evening? Now we'll adjourn at 8:31.